Hi everyone, Gigabeef here. Today we're going to talk a little bit about labs, and primarily the steps that I've taken to get started on the map. Labs is a super intimidating map for those who haven't played it before, which until recently included myself. With the wipe coming up, I figured I'd give it a go and see how it ends up, and hopefully help a few people along the way. Ideally, having played a good amount of Tarkov but learning labs from scratch will allow me to share some of what I've learned from the perspective a bit closer to that of a regular player than a seasoned pro of labs that knows every nook and cranny. For getting started on these maps, it's the bigger concepts we need to focus on, such as where to go and how not to die, that are important at the start. Personally, the reason I'd never run labs before was a combination of a few things. A bit of fear of the unknown, and the high percentage of skilled PMCs on the map, but primarily due to continuous accusations of death to hacking that you see on Reddit all the time. So far I'm pleased to report that I haven't really run into any, barring one 50-50 situation involving a grenade out of nowhere, but it is perfectly possible that that was legitimate given the clues that were present around me at the time, so I really don't think it's as bad as people have said. So straight off, we need to talk about a few key differences between labs and other maps. As most of you will be aware, labs requires a relatively expensive single-use keycard to enter. This currently as of 0.12 can be bought from level 4 therapist once per refresh at 157.5 thousand rubles, or from the flea market for a bit more, around 230k. This is quite a bit of investment for most players under level 20, and is primarily the reason that people are put off from playing the map to begin with. You effectively need to make this money back before you even begin to make a profit on labs, so once you've bought in gear and the possibility of death in each raid, it really starts to add up. This leads me on to the next big difference: no insurance. Insurance does not work on labs. Anything insured previously will not come back, so don't bother insuring it before the raid. This, in combination with the keycard and potential death, means the labs can be very expensive if you mess it up. Now I would like to point out here that the difference between running solo and as a duo or a squad is even more stark when playing labs. Typically solos lose more of their gear anyway due to having no one around if you die. As a duo, if your buddy wins the firefight, you'll typically get your stuff back either through insurance or simply being able to take it out of the raid and giving it back to you in the next one. The weight update in this current iteration of Tarkov has not helped and made this worse, as a solo can easily have every piece of kit stripped by a duo, but the other way around, an individual player will struggle to take the equipment of two if they manage to win, so the duo will get some of their gear back at least. This is compounded and is even worse on labs, as once you're dead with no insurance, that is it, the kit is gone. As a duo, you need your partner to take your stuff, otherwise it's gone as well, so there is still a second chance for a duo that does not happen for a solo player. Once that kit is lost and you're on your own and you have no more teammates, there is absolutely no chance of you getting that equipment back. It is not physically possible. The final big difference is that all of the scavs on labs are scav raiders. They are meaner and better geared than your regular scav, so all in all, labs is a bit of a scary map before we even start looking at the layout. Let's move on to the map itself. The labs map is truly intimidating, as it is very complex and looks impossible at first glance. We need to start by taking broad brushstrokes over the main areas, using one of my favourite maps that was posted recently on Reddit. I think this map is very clear and shows the areas in an intuitive way, which is unlike a lot of the other maps that I've seen for labs, that I personally found quite confusing when I was first starting to try and learn it. Generally speaking, labs are split into three areas: the basement and two upper floors of the main lab itself. Initially I found this confusing as well, as although in the southern section of the map this delineation is very clear, in the northern side, the top floor is typically a walkway around the outside of the middle floor. It seems obvious once you've been on the map a bit, but I often found myself getting confused as to where I was until I realised this. The basement is probably the easiest to figure out at first, as it's more or less a series of corridors and rooms, although it is a little sprawling. I would argue that it is the most important floor in some ways, because most of the easy exits are present there. The two upper floors broadly consist of what I like to think of as the medical area, which looks very similar on both floors, and then two large office spaces, one in the centre and one in the north. It's these two office areas where the top and middle floors are kind of one area. Next, let's talk about exfils. Naturally, these are one of the most important features of a map, as you need to leave at some point. Labs exits are a little more nuanced than on others, as there are conditions on all of them, which to be honest is pretty cool. It's a bit like the power switch they've added to interchange in the power station area. As mentioned, the basement has most of the easy exits, two of which are activated by a switch that turns on an elevator, and one being to pump water out of a pipe so that you can leave. There is also a vent that can be used with no bag, but I'm not sure why you'd ever do that, to be honest. We're coming to labs for a ton of loot, and we're very unlikely to dip early due to the entry costs. These basement exits are by far my favourite, especially the elevators as the switches are quite close by, so it's really not much of a hassle. The medical elevator on the southern side is activated by a nearby switch in a small server room just down the corridor on the left hand side. As you can see, it's nice and close, so this is an easy exit. This one is best to take if you're near the medical area stairs. Before we go on, I'd just like to pause for a moment to ask you to like and subscribe if you've enjoyed the video so far. I always hate to ask, but it means a huge amount to a new channel like mine when trying to get started. Alright, thanks everyone, and let's get back to it. The main elevator is similar, but this time on the northern side. Once you've activated the switch, then you move through this small little server room to get to the elevator. It's again another close and nice easy one. I think I've used this one the most so far, and it has an easy pathway from the very north edge of the map that we'll go through in a little bit. There's a couple of other extracts that are possible, one being yet another lift which requires yet another switch. However, you need to traverse the floors as the switch is on the ground floor, and if it's not already been activated by someone else, it's not really as good. The lift is itself on the top floor. If I wasn't nearby and it hadn't been activated, I'd probably just use one of the others. This is more of an opportunistic exit. Then, there are the parking gate and hangar door exits flanking the two sides of the northern area and the central area respectively, which firstly aren't open all the time, and secondly spawn raiders and play an alarm. This is useful if you want to farm those guys, but for starting off I'd avoid them and use the safer extracts that I've mentioned before. There are also a load of Russian phrases that are said over the tannoy depending on which buttons were pressed and which exits were opened. Each one has its own sector assigned to it, which is said in the final part of the Russian announcement. I'll put the letters up and play them to show you, but let's not worry too much about these for now, just be aware of what it means.
Внимание охране! Несанкционированные действия в секторе G. Внимание персоналу! Лифты в секторе R введены в строй. Внимание персоналу! Лифты в секторе O введены в строй. Внимание охране! Несанкционированные действия в секторе Y11. Внимание охране! Несанкционированные действия в секторе B11.
There's also a bunch of random ambient sounds in labs that don't mean anything except for making it creepy as hell, like we needed that. This is the general alarm and the other background crashing or pipe-like noises. The next point of discussion is the Keycard Rooms. We're going to use a slightly different map from the wiki, because it has the Keycard Rooms on them, just for the ease of display. There are 6 cards other than the main entry key, and in order of price this is red and violet, blue, green, black, and yellow. These cards are all infinite use, and are useful to know the locations because either you have a card and you want to go there, or because it's a location that attracts other players and can be a hotspot, so you need to watch out and be mindful. Red is otherwise known as Arsenal, and is extremely close to Violet at the top of the map, and are effectively weapons rooms. They have a bunch of loot like scopes, modded weapons, and high-end barter items. These are the most expensive keys in the game. You also need an extra key to get into the small locked closet in the red room. Blue is one of the main medical areas on the middle floor. This has a decent amount of medical loot inside, and is a reasonable sized room with a couple of boxes and different med cases. Black has a smaller med area quite close to blue, with a really creepy setting in it and a bed with a light. This is a strange room, but there's not that much loot in there. Green is the main medical area on the top floor, and is a huge room which is full of stuff. This is as good as blue for loot. It's kind of more spread out, so you have to look over all the desks and everything. Finally yellow, which is a bad room, as in there's a few PCs and one tall white weapons cabinet. The primary use for this room is turning off the announcer for the parking gate exit, so you can get out without anybody knowing that you've activated it. Next we're going to talk about ways to move around the map. Some of the really important ways to move that I've found are up to the arsenal room through the cafeteria, and then down the stairs, which can get you right to the main elevator, which is a really lovely pathway to take and is quite secure. You don't really have to go through any large open rooms, and it's all very enclosed, and the pathway is pretty straightforward. Naturally, we can also use the staircases from the medical area, noting that -3 is the top floor and -5 is the basement, to get down to the medical elevator or to the sewer system on the far side. One point that's been quite useful is if you're near the big server room, you can potentially jump down depending on your weight and tolerance for broken legs. This is actually affected by your weight more than anything else as to how much damage you're going to take when you drop. However, even if you have a broken leg, pop a painkiller and you're right next to the medical exit, so it's really not that risky. Finally, we're going to talk about fighting raiders. Like all AI and scavs, raiders are scary in some circumstances and really not that bad in others. Maybe they've toned them down a bit over time, because after playing against them myself, I was expecting a much harsher enemy and was a little disappointed and surprised as to how stupid they can be. However, they really can get you over long ranges, and they love to throw grenades, which can make them quite annoying. Often you know they are there due to the passive voice lines, which are actually the same as the PMC voices, and typically you can shoot them before they throw their grenades, which gives you a nice window of opportunity to face tap them. So in short, the basic rules are: don't engage them in the open, keep them near to you to engage in close quarter combat, especially around corners. If they are riled up, which you can tell from the voices, peek with caution. Watch out for grenades, and keep cover nearby to duck behind. Sometimes they can take an incredible amount of punishment, however, and can be a little inconsistent. So as always, the best way to get better is just to start. Play around in offline, figure out a couple of routes, and add to your knowledge as you go along. Be prepared to die and not worry about it, and try to learn as much as you can before the wipe. I still have plenty to learn myself about PvP on the map, and that will have to be for another time. Thanks everyone for watching, have fun and good luck in your raids.